working drummer.
Now kick it.
This is the Working Drummer Podcast, serving up perspectives, experiences, and stories from ground-level working pros. Advice, tips, and secrets on how to build a career in the music business.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Working Drummer. I'm Zach Albetta, and my conversation today is with Marlon Patton. In the months leading up to my move to Atlanta, I was doing research on the drummers in the area here, and from what I saw on Facebook and YouTube and his website, Marlon seemed to just be everywhere doing everything. And having been here a while, I can tell you that is 100% true. Marlon is involved in a huge array of projects using an equally huge skill set. He's constantly playing live shows across many genres. He does all kinds of different recording projects, both as drummer and engineer, both in his home studio and commercial studios. And he strikes a great balance between the work he does around Atlanta and the work he does on the road. Keep those hashtags coming on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. It's great to see what everybody's up to out there. Of course, we love seeing pics of your drums or videos of your playing, but we've also seen some cool posts about weird or funny stuff that happens on gigs, the commute, the load-in, the crazy people you encounter, whatever. It's all part of our working drummer life. So again, post using the hashtag working drummer, and we'll be reposting. So here we go with Marlon Patton. Hope you dig it. So there's a lot to talk about with you, but I just want to start with where we are right now in your home studio and how it came to be.
Okay. Well, I mean, I started recording a really long time ago as just kind of a way to get my own ideas down and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I guess over the years, it just became like in all the bands I was with, I became kind of the guy that did the demos, and like, you know, I had the space to record everybody. And just like year after year, I just kind of started collecting more and more gear and stuff like that. And then found this house. We're in Tucker, Georgia, which is like a suburb of Atlanta. Found this house and saw that there was a window conveniently looking into a room that would be a great drum room, and just started like envisioning the whole setup of the place. And like just, you know, year after year, like invest a little bit in gear here, buy some new mics, buy some new preamps and stuff like that. And finally it's gotten to this place where it's like taking over the house.
Right.
Pretty much.
Right. And so like when you walk into a place like this, it seems like a daunting task to get it to this point, from like if you're starting from scratch. Yeah. Because you had to build stuff in there, mm-hmm. You had to buy a bunch of gear, you had to outfit, you know, the sound treatment and all that. So like what were the first steps you took?
I think the first steps would probably just be like putting up some sound deadening treatment and stuff like that. But I mean, I've been here for 11 years now. So like at first it was just like one room, you know, everybody get in one room.
Right.
You know, screw bleed, just everything, all the mics are bleeding into each other and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'd have people over and we'd work on stuff and we'd write in here. But I guess the first big construction project, I separated the drum room from another ISO room and then built a vocal booth. So that was some actual, like, you know, swinging hammers. Kind of stuff.
And you were doing the swinging.
And I was doing the swinging.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, me and a buddy of mine, Daniel Clay, did actually in trade for some studio time. He helped me build a wall. Yeah, helped me build a wall with a sliding glass door in it. But
you did it. You built a wall and you made somebody else pay for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
It can be done.
It can be done. Triple CT. Yeah. I'm trying to think what, like, you know, gear, like the good preamps are so expensive that I guess like the disadvantage and the advantage of it is I can only afford one little piece of gear at a time. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I get this one piece of gear and I really like tweak it and learn it and get another piece of gear. And I mean, this is definitely 10 years of collecting and stuff like that. And
well, that sounds like kind of a blessing and a curse. Like if you can't afford to get everything you want all at once,
right,
you got to really learn how to work with what you got,
exactly,
and master it and see what it can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, what were the first big purchases?
Let's see. the first big purchases were probably like the lunchbox and some API preamps. And those are like $750 a pop or something like that. So I was starting to really sink some at the time some very serious cash into it.
Yeah.
And then I bought some pretty substantial, some kind of industry standard microphones that are fairly up there.
Which are what?
Like some cool ribbon mics, like a Coles ribbon, and I bought a Neumann U87 for vocals, which is kind of the you hear it and you're like, oh yeah, I get it.
Right. Yeah.
That's the sound I've heard on every recording, for 100,000 years. Actually, more like 50 years. But, and then I guess the biggest purchase I've ever made on an instrument would be that piano you just saw,
right? Which
was pretty recent, but it's an awesome Yamaha grand piano.
Yeah, that's a hell of a thing for especially a home studio. I think to have a grand piano,
I know,
in its own room,
barely fits. Yeah, but it sounds great in there, and people love the piano. I was telling you earlier that it's like the most expensive instrument I own, and I suck at piano. But people that come and play it, I mean, I just love hearing great piano players on it.
Yeah,
and like most of the piano players in Atlanta have recorded on it at some point or another.
Right. So drums is obviously your primary instrument, but what else do you play, and to what extent of seriousness do the other instruments come in?
Well, I do play bass. I actually had a gig on bass last night.
Oh, cool.
On upright bass. And I play electric bass, and I really enjoy playing bass, and I do work with some producers that just come over and get me to kind of just say, here, play some stuff, and I'll play drums, and I'll track drums on a track, maybe track some percussion, and then go over with some electric bass and stuff like that. So, I mean, I'd say that would be my secondary instrument that I actually do gig on and stuff like that. I could pick out some stuff on guitar and know some chords and stuff, but wouldn't dare gig on the guitar. There's plenty of amazing guitar players. There's plenty of amazing bass players too. If I get a call for bass, I'm like, wow, the cats are working tonight.
Right. Cool. So in addition to, amassing all the gear and outfitting the actual structure of the room, you've had to master all these skills in order to run this studio. So when did your interest and your education in engineering and that side of things begin?
Yeah, I've always been super interested every time I've gone into another studio, a commercial space or something to do a session. I've just always geeked out on the littlest things, just like the placement of the diffusers and like how, like the placement of the microphones and drum miking and just like hearing what it sounds like in the control room versus hearing what it sounds like behind the kit. All that kind of stuff is I've just really geeked out on that. And so I guess I was probably kind of annoying in my early 20s or something, just like asking engineers too many questions and being like, okay, let me do my job now.
Right. Just go play, will you please?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I've always been really interested in that side of things.
And so in addition to like pestering engineers and what you're pretty much self-taught as far as that goes?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, definitely.
Man. And so in what ways have you found that, because like when you run your own studio, you're worrying about drum selection, drum tuning, and sound manipulation, mic placement, and then, behind the glass, editing, all the computer shit, the Pro Tools, all that.
Right.
So in what ways have you found that all of those skills sort of converge?
Well, I think with drum sounds and stuff like that, I can think ahead a little bit, if that makes sense. Like I'm more familiar with the way a drum is going to translate in a track, I feel like. And then also like when I'm doing my own drum tracking, I'm kind of hyper aware of every kind of part I've done and every fill I've done. So like, when I do take after take after take, I'm like, well, I haven't done this kind of fill yet here. So that'd be cool to edit from. in this particular moment or something like that. Maybe I'll do something drastically different on this bridge, and I can pull the bridge out and put it in take 2, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm like kind of try to stay aware of giving myself options to edit from, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You are involved in all sorts of different projects and all sorts of different genres. Is there anything about recording drums and capturing drum sound that you've found to be universal, regardless of genre?
I'm trying to think here. I mean, honestly, I do record a lot of like straight ahead jazz here. The piano and all that stuff. And that kind of sound is a little bit more, I guess, I don't want to say purist, but you're just kind of capturing the sound of the drums. You know what I mean? You're just getting a straight, like, pristine kind of drum kit sound. And you want the definition from the cymbals, and you want to, like, just capture what things sound like in the room. And I feel like with more aggressive music or, recording rock and stuff, you want a little more, like, compression, and you want a little bit more of what you feel like in a venue, like a live show, like the feeling of things pumping and speakers moving, and stuff like that. So I wouldn't say that is totally universal, except for the fact that you just want to, capture what's in the room,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you don't want to have to screw with it after the fact. Like, as much as possible, you want to get the sound you want coming off the drums from the get-go. Yeah, exactly. And whether that be like rock music too. I mean, I feel like to feel the energy of a compressor pumping in the headphone mix is kind of cool. You know what I mean? So like, why not, you can go ahead and do it while you're tracking. Yeah. You're going to probably crush it later in the mix. Why not do it? You know what I mean? Do it with some cool outboard gear. Yeah. I want more compressors, by the way. But, working on it. That's the next thing. Yeah. Right. I remember when I first started recording, it was like in college where you go to the school studio and just record your little combo or whatever. I couldn't wait to hear what, the studio or the engineer made my drums sound like. Right. And I didn't worry too much about what they actually sounded like. And it goes to show kind of what a novice I was and how naive I was, because, I didn't worry too much about the tuning. I didn't worry too much about the room. I was like, oh, they're going to make it sound awesome. Right. But when I listened back to it, it was like, no, they just made them sound how they sounded. Right. Kind of up to me to I feel like I've made that mistake a couple times too, in trusting that something was going to be fixed or something was going to be, even tweaked with. I was doing this jazz record many years back, and he wanted me this little triangle overdub thing, and I just to signal that it was only through the head, and to signal that the head was over, I just did this little cheesy tick 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 kind of thing on the triangle, and it's on the record. I was like, really? You guys thought I was serious? Yeah, that was a lesson. Because I look like an idiot. Right. You mentioned that when you started recording, you would be geeking out with the engineer and trying to learn as much as you can. Like, what's your approach when you're in someone else's studio now? Now I try to kind of stay out of the way, and I really enjoy being in other studios. I mean, I enjoy tracking here too, but when I track here, I really have to take the time to get everything set. I guess before I can sit down behind the kit and try to be creative, you know what I mean? If I'm running cables, running mics, and doing all that, and then sitting down and okay, it's time to play now. I can't do that. So it's great to go to another studio and have that ready for you to just sit down and I just really focus on, I'll ask the engineer, how the snare is translating and if he has any suggestions or stuff like that. But I think I typically try to be just respectful and quiet and do my job. Yeah. Is there ever a time where you're like, oh, I'm stealing that idea? Or on the other side, this guy really doesn't know what he's doing, but I'm just going to shut up about it? Yeah, there's been, being in Atlanta, there's been a couple sessions where you can tell a lion's share of what they do is vocals. It's kind of a hip hop town. So it's
they can fly on vocal editing and auto-tune and all this stuff is just like, whoa, like this just looks like they're typing a dissertation or something, But then, they'll asking me what mics to put on the drums and things like that, or like maybe having a 57 pointed straight down at a snare, like it's a needle on a record or something, and you're like, I'm just gonna adjust this a little bit for you guys.
Right.
But that's only half. That's very, very rare. I'd say for the most part, I try to learn from whoever, in that capacity, because I don't consider myself an engineer first by any means at all.
Yeah. Well, your house tells a different story.
Yeah.
So you grew up around here.
Decatur.
Okay. And did you go to Georgia State?
I didn't. I went to University of Georgia in Athens.
Okay.
Yeah.
So talk about that program. What'd you study there?
It's a public school, public college without much of a jazz school, but I was lucky enough to have some really good drum instructors, and Steve Dance was over there. He's in Atlanta now, pianist, jazz band director. I learned a ton from him. I mean, he was pretty influential and a great guy. And then I took from a drummer named Arvin Scott, who taught me a lot about the Alan Dawson method. He kind of started me on that whole thing, and got started on New Breed. If you're familiar with that book.
Yeah.
I swear I worked on New Breed 1 and 2 for probably about 15 years or something. I don't know.
Wow.
It's just like consistent,
Right.
You can, like that's one of those books that I could just keep working on the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And pull my hair out doing it. But yeah, and then Dr. McCutcheon was the head of the percussion department, and he really respected jazz and plays drum kit as well. His specialty is more mallets and mallet percussion and stuff like that. But he has a deep respect for drum set, which was not found amongst the other departments. I would say. I was gonna say
I think that's kind of uncommon in percussion departments, because I think a lot of classical percussion professors, they'll suffer drum set.
Yeah, exactly. Which I've never understood, because like the amount of the spots for work for the drum set player, like just multiple of the spots for classical percussion.
Yeah.
And I'm not dissing classical percussion. That stuff is amazing. I can't play with that level of perfection ever.
Right. Right.
It's like,
right.
I don't know. I just feel like, why not teach your students something that they can apply?
Because this is college, man.
Yeah.
Well, it was cool what you mentioned about, what was your jazz director's name?
Steve Dance.
Cool. Yeah. I had kind of the same experience in the multiple colleges I went to. I learned as much, if not more, about just playing jazz drums from the directors of those bands as I did from the people I was taking private lessons with, because the directors are going to tell you like what the band needs.
Right.
Your private drum instructor will approach it from the drummer's standpoint.
Yeah.
And you'll get into the real inside baseball of jazz drums and coordination and the styles and all that. But I think the directors kind of kept me focused on the big picture. Like, I don't care what fill you want to do here. Here's what the band needs. So what were some of the lessons that you took from that?
Well, I think Steve was a combo director and director of the big band, and there was a particular moment where I just basically walked out of the end of that class with my tail tucked between my legs and my head down, because he just came over and he put a metronome on my stand. Just dropped it on the stand like a mic drop. Like, here you go.
Clank.
Yeah. And I learned a lot about that, about how, in big band used to freak the shit out of me, man.
Yeah.
Like, it's just such a huge chair.
Right.
It's just such a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
And like, I couldn't get the idea that you had to really push forward, because that many horns are going to be it just drags. You know what I mean? It's just, you have to like be a freaking freight train, whatever. And I've always been like a kind of reactionary kind of player. You know what I mean? Like, if the bass player is going behind the beat, I'm like, well, what's going on? I guess am I rushing? Like kind of thing. Like I question myself a lot and stuff like that. You can't do that in big band.
You just have to be a dick.
Yeah. Basically, it's like, here's the beat, motherfucker.
Right. Yeah.
And it took me a while to really figure that out. And I'm act like I have it figured out. I don't. But I do love, like, big band gigs are fun now for me. Finally.
Yeah.
You know,
once you learn how to touch them just right.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Caesar. You know, like with the dogs. If he's not yelling and screaming at them.
Right.
It's just if you do this little thing, all of a sudden the band falls in line. And it's not always about playing loud. Like
no, it's not.
A lot of times if the band isn't lining up, or if they're dragging or whatever. For the longest time, my instinct, and I think most people's instinct, is to play louder. Like you said, here's the beat, motherfuckers. But if, I just started dropping the volume. Like if I play quieter than they're playing and they can't hear me, all of a sudden everybody's listening for the drummer. Like, oh shit, where'd he go?
Right. No, I totally agree. And I also just play quarter notes on the ride.
Right.
I really like that. I mean, I feel like when you do that, all of a sudden the band's like, oh, there it is.
Right.
Like, you don't have to do a bunch of, like, a busy ride, like jazz ride pattern.
That's a perfect example of, like, the jazz director versus the drum lesson. Because in the drum lesson, you study Tony and you study Elvin and all that really super syncopated jazz ride stuff.
Those guys are not playing with big bands.
It doesn't work in the big band.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So what kind of a town is Athens? That has quite a storied...
Man, Athens is great. I mean, there's the REM and B-52s and all that stuff. But there's more bands per capita in Athens than I think anywhere else in the country.
Ugh.
So
God.
Ugh.
I mean, that's... I'm so cynical. That's something to be celebrated, but when I think about it, I just think of all these bands, like, biting each other on the back for gigs and
there's there's a lot of venues for such a small town. And it's not small. I mean, the freaking university itself has, I think it's like 30,000 students.
I thought it was more than that.
It might be
it's like
50, 80.
It's
something crazy.
It's a city-state over there.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a ton of musicians, and, I have to say my education really also came from some of the guys over there, and I got my first weekly jazz gig at a place called Foundry Park Inn with just this great bass player mentor, Carl Lindbergh, and he took me on as like a 20-year-old green kid for a weekly gig, and he was an Athens staple for many years. So yeah, I mean, it's there's so much I learned from just being able to gig and so many musicians around, and then I was in a hippie jam band and all that kind of stuff too.
Right.
So
what was the majority of your time spent in school? Like, what were you practicing? What were you studying?
I used to go down to the practice rooms fairly frequently and just bang out, I was working, like I said, like, you mean, like, drum stuff?
Yeah, drums, like drum set versus percussion, like...
Yeah, I mean, I had to do a fair amount of mallet work and stuff like that, but I would just take a year and learn a piece kind of thing, you know what I mean? I was so bad at that. I never understood how cats can, like, play with four mallets, read music, and watch a director.
Yeah.
And just say, where are your eyes going? I don't understand. So I would just, my teachers knew that drum set was my thing, and but I had to do the other stuff. So I did play some timpani. I played some. I practiced some vibraphone. Never very good at that. I learned a couple pretty intense marimba pieces.
Yeah. A lot of them are intense.
They're all intense, I know. Percussion ensemble, I enjoyed stuff like that. But I'm not a very good note reader. I can read hits and rhythms and stuff like that, but notes escape me. Right.
It was the same with me. If sitting down with a big band chart, no problem.
Yeah.
Learning a marimba piece, like, I had to be in a room alone, just like really going slow and putting the pieces together.
Yeah.
One by one.
Yeah. Especially the four mallet thing.
Yeah. It was crazy.
I don't even remember the grip. Right? No, I do. Yeah.
So when I talk to people, did you graduate? Did you get your degree? When I talk to people who went to college and went through a whole program, I'm interested in their transition from academic life to professional life. And for some people it was like all academics and then jump into pro, and for others it was gradual and sort of, you know, as the academics are winding down, the pro is ramping up. And so like, what was that transition like for you?
I definitely had the more transitional thing as you're talking about. Dr. McCutcheon, the head of the thing, he ran a head of the percussion department. The head of the thing. The head of the percussion department.
Is that on the website?
Yeah.
Dr. McCutcheon, head of the thing.
DA. So he had a steel drum ensemble, which was pretty fun.
Yeah.
And I played kit in that. And he would gig with the steel drum ensemble. So he would get all of his students on these gigs, and he would always call me for gigs and a bass player, and get like maybe 2 pan players or something like that. And we'd play these private events and stuff like that. And he probably taught me more about like professionalism in gigging than anyone, because his thing was, you know, show up on time, wear what you're supposed to wear, like all this kind of practical stuff that you just kind of learn over time or whatever. And I mean, it sounds obvious, but I mean, he would harp on those kind of things.
Yeah.
You know?
That's more than half the battle.
Right.
And just like show up, wear the right shit.
Have a cool attitude.
Have the right instruments.
Yeah.
And, you know, and how you actually play after that matters a lot less. If you get all that shit right, you know, you can just play competently and you'll be fine.
He was all about that kind of practicality to gigging and stuff like that. So those were probably my early like corporate gigs or whatever. And then, you know, I would gig with guys like Carl and then Trey Wright in town. So I was playing jazz gigs, and I was doing some road work in college, just like, you know, traveling to Auburn and playing,
crashing on couches,
stuff like that. So I was doing that probably the last 3 or 4 years of getting my degree. The last 4 years of it. Because it only took 5.5. But the last 3 years was definitely ramping up and up. And then I spent another year in Athens, just, you know, freelancing and gigging and stuff like that. And I got involved in a couple studios and was doing some session work there. And when I moved to Atlanta, I got hooked up with a few people that were just kind of regular workhorse gigging folks.
Right.
You know.
Right. And was the plan always to move to Atlanta after college?
I don't know if that was always the plan. I mean, you know, I always thought about New York and LA, places like that. But the older I get, the more New York just kind of floats away into like, you know, I got a yard.
Yeah. I got a yard and a big dog.
And a big dog. Yeah. Which I don't know where he is right now.
I'm sure he'll make an appearance.
I'm sure he will.
Yeah. And talk about LA, because it seems like you're sort of fascinated with LA. I know you know, Aaron Sterling and Matt Chamberlain are kind of guys that you hold in high regard.
Absolutely.
How much were you ever tempted to like really move to LA and
well, you know, I have some family out there, so I spent a lot of time out there. And I feel like I've always kind of romanticized LA.
It's easy to do.
Yeah. Like, I don't know, I have this idea of like, you know, Jim Keltner, Steve Gadd just going from session to session in a limo or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, I really, you know, I have that, like, 70s LA is kind of what I think of when I think of LA, and like jingle sessions and everything, like thousands of sessions going on all the time. I'm sure there's still a ton of session work, but yeah, I listen to guys like Aaron Sterling and guys that are just so focused on the sounds of the drums, and it's pretty inspiring. And the caliber of studio work out there, I'm sure, is quite high. So I mean, I really do love it. I mean, I think it's a really cool place. Granted, I've only spent, you know, a month there at a time.
Right.
So. Right.
Well, that's long enough to get a taste of it.
Yeah.
You know, spend a few days in traffic and.
Yeah. You know, the traffic moves over there, though, I will say.
Well, this is a debate that you and I have had before.
Yeah.
Like the traffic, the traffic moves, but it can happen at any time. Like we're getting off. We'll get back onto the drums in a second.
Yeah.
But for those of you considering,
if you want to hear about traffic patterns
moving to LA,
metropolitan areas,
yeah. No, that like the traffic usually moves there, but it can come up at any time. You can be driving home at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, and just get slammed with like a mile of backup because of construction or because of an accident or whatever.
Oh, that's crazy.
I feel like in Atlanta, the traffic is insane at the times and in the places you expect it to be.
Right.
So if anybody wants to weigh in on LA versus ATL, go to the website.
Here's Leo.
Yeah. Hey, Leo.
Leo's my 100-pound Great Pyrenees.
Yeah. Well, this is a perfect opportunity to bring up Weishund.
Yeah.
So talk about that project.
That is a duo project that I have with my fellow collaborator and uber-talented guitar player, singer, Rick Lawler.
Right.
So it's a duo in which I play drums and bass pedals, which is a thing that I think I've started. There might be another guy or two around doing it. I don't know.
And for those of you wondering what this has to do with the dog, Weishund is German for white dog.
Correct.
The band is named after Leo,
and
the big white dog.
Me and Rick do terrible German accents at rehearsal, where we're like, "Oh, that's my Weishund." There he is.
Yeah, there he is. Yeah.
Oh, so Weishund does not like this number. Maybe we should move on to the next. So we,
talk about the bass pedal thing.
Yeah, it's pretty fun, man, and it's something that came about because for some reason in my 32, 33 years old, I decided to start taking Taekwondo.
Okay.
Something I kind of always want. I was always like, I did backyard karate, when I was a kid. I was like, man, I should try it.
Yeah.
Good workout, fun. Not the best thing if you're a drummer, maybe, that, working nightly using all of his limbs.
Uh-huh.
So I was doing some Taekwondo, practicing on my own, not in the dojo, and broke my left ankle. Shattered it. In a cast, 3 months in a cast, crutches, all that kind of thing.
Damn.
And I kept gigging. It was my left ankle. I gigged without a hi-hat. Just kept it closed, which, by the way, I would recommend drummers try not using a hi-hat for a while.
Really?
Because, oh my God, I feel like it centered my beat more. I was always a left foot bouncer.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
me too.
kind of relied on it. And not playing with it was so scary at first. And I was playing, actually the first gig I had back was 2 days after I broke my ankle. I'm still getting used to crutches and
still in pain, probably.
Yeah, in pain.
Ugh.
And I had a show with a band called Larkin Poe opening up for the Indigo Girls at the Botanical Gardens. And it was just thousands of people. And I'm up there trying to figure this set out, with no left foot, So I just kept a hi-hat on gigs, did stationary closed hat, And I guess I just over the course of 3 or 4 months got used to playing and working with it. And I also found out who my true friends were that would help me load gear and unload.
Yeah. That's important.
Yeah. So, crutches, man, you can't do anything.
Oh God.
I mean, you literally can't. Like, I could only carry a stick bag.
I can't imagine.
So when I got the facility of my foot back, I'm rambling. When I got the facility of my foot back, I decided, maybe I should try. See what else I can do with it, and I had these foot pedals that are, it's from an organ,
right?
It's like an octave C to C,
right,
of just organ foot pedals. And I connect that to a Moog Minotaur synth and run that into a big old Ampeg SVT and play root notes and play bass lines with my left foot, and keep a closed hi-hat on the right side where the ride normally is,
right?
Ride on the left side, so it's a little bit reversed kind of thing, but it works. I mean, it's a big, huge, full sound for a duo.
It is. It's cool. And I was wondering what made you guys want to keep it a duo instead of just getting a bass player. But it sounds like the pedal thing came first.
It did.
And I see.
And then Rick and I got together and we're like, we should try this. And we basically stayed up all night on a whiskey-fueled jam.
Yeah.
Stayed up till 4 a.m. and we're like, this is awesome. Had that feeling.
This is awesome, yeah.
Yeah. Well, also, this is so good. So we had that feeling of like, we both play like kind of genre hop a bit and
Right.
play around the jazz world and play around rock gigs and with singer-songwriters and stuff. So we both felt that feeling that we had early, like in the garage playing with our friends kind of thing. So, and we're both huge, like Bonham was my absolute first influence.
Yeah.
And John Bonham does everything right, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And he's just the man. And I still, like, when a Zeppelin tune comes on now, I'm like, God, why is that so good?
Yeah.
You know, like, just so good.
Yeah.
And, Hendrix was a huge thing for him. So we were like, kind of like getting back to our pre-jazz training.
Yeah.
Just go for it kind of attitude. And I mean, the jazz, of course, plays in with our ability to say, let's do the bridge here. Let's go to this change. Let's do So I mean, we're still communicating with that knowledge, but it's just like kind of the attitude of pre-education in a way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I get that. I watching your videos and listening to your stuff, I don't know how much you want to or don't want to be compared to the not the White Stripes, the Black Keys. But it reminded me of the Black Keys, but much more cleanly executed and more grown up.
Okay.
Musically.
Cool. I mean, yeah, we love their production. Their, you know what I mean? Like that rawness of them, I think, is definitely what we're trying to capture.
Right. But like you said, you're also bringing kind of your whole jazz education and the years that you've been doing all these different things. You bring that experience to that sort of raw genre, and it shows.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, we're working on a record right now.
When's that coming out?
We're slated, trying to get it out by August. So,
cool. And you're recording that here?
Yeah, recording it here. We just finished a single that we should be trying to release pretty soon off the record, and had a guy named Tom Lewis in Athens mix it and master it, and sounds pretty big. Oh, we're excited, man. We just work together really well, and I feel like those are the kind of relationships you need to, foster and focus on.
Yeah.
It's like when something just clicks with another person.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how.
And Rick clicks with everybody. He's just such a
Right.
sweetheart and such a badass that
I know.
I haven't met a
Same
single
time.
person that's like, I don't really like Rick.
Yeah, you see him walking down the street, and you're like, oh, hey, what's up, dude? And you see him with the guitar, and he's just all of a sudden transforms into this bad motherfucker.
Yeah.
Like, whoa. Where did that come from?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So a couple of the other projects you're involved in are Kenosha Kid and the ATL Collective. So just hit those briefly.
Yeah. So Kenosha Kid is fronted by Athens-based guitarist named Dan Nettles, and Dan just blazes his own path, and I mean I believe he went to Berkeley and went through a lot of the sort of educational things that a lot of guitar players do, but he really does his own thing and writes instrumental music.
Right, Kenosha Kid is instrumental.
Kenosha Kid is instrumental.
Weishund is does Rick write those songs?
Yeah, we collaborate on the music and he writes the lyrics.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, Weishund is with vocals and Kenosha Kid is instrumental, but like it's like indie rock jazz. I would say like it's very focused on like groove and melody.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Dan does these really amazing soundscape. His pedal board is really cool, and he's like really geeks out on like sound pads, soundscapes, atmospheric stuff that he just lay down and then play on the top of and stuff like that. So
it's a cool vibe because like from what I've heard, it's not really licks based,
right?
The way a lot of that instrumental sort of jazz, I guess it's some type of fusion if you want to call it that.
But it is. But it's not like here's how many notes we can do.
Right.
Whatever.
It's just like you're like you said, trying to create sort of certain atmospheres, certain soundscapes, and just kind of live in them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Robbie plays bass with that. Robbie Hanley, and he and I go way back playing together. We've known each other for a long time now. Played on a lot of different sessions together. And Robbie is the man.
He is.
You had a chance to play with him yet?
Yeah, quite a few times.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Robbie is the man. He's like one of the most creative bass players I've ever played with. He's a melodic bass player.
He really is. Just like playing a church gig with that guy.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it's so much fun, you know?
Right.
Like, because he comes up with really melodic bass lines that don't get in the way, that complement the songs and make them something cooler than they would normally be.
Absolutely. I feel like if other guys try to get up there and it just sounds busy, but when he does it, it's just tasteful and really nice.
Totally.
Yeah.
So he's one of the head honchos of the ATL Collective?
Yes, he's the music director at ATL Collective. And what that is a group of people covering classic records, basically. And a lot of times it'll be a house band scenario where, you know, they'll have, you know, the guitar player, the drummer, and the bass player and keyboard player will kind of stay up there. And different songwriters will come on, maybe 3 songwriters per record, and each one will do 3 songs off the record. So we've done a lot of cool records. I'd say some highlights for me would be we covered Graceland. Yeah, which is just so fun. One coming up is TLC's Crazy Sexy Cool.
Oh wow!
Yeah, which should be pretty cool.
That'll be over the summer.
Yeah, that'll be over the summer in June, and then also in July, one I'm going to be a part of is Are You Experienced?
Oh wow!
Hendrix one, and Rick is actually doing that one. So
holy shit!
So I'm gonna get my Mitch Mitchell on. Yeah, yeah, and it's really fun because you kind of. Like all through your education, you know, you're trying to transcribe some jazz greats, and you're learning patterns like that. This is like a chance to really, like, how many times you transcribe Jim Gordon, you know, or Keltner, or like guys like that just play straight grooves, and it's like it's really interesting to kind of get inside those records. And I always try to make it a transcription project, you know, where I just transcribe the record. And I probably won't do that with Mitch. Yeah. Because half the time I'm not even sure if he repeats himself. Right. Once, you know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, he's playing jazz drums with a rock guitar player. Yep. And that's the sound, you know? Yeah. But it's really cool to get inside some of these like studio greats' heads. And just like hear their parts and what they do differently, like the little different things they might do on a chorus or a bridge or something like that. It's cool. And it's always a mystery to me if you come across something really cool like that you never noticed before, that you wouldn't think to do in a million years. It's always a mystery to me. Like, did they just come up with that naturally, or was that something they sat down and really, really thought out? And in either case, my mind is blown. Right. You know, one thing that a lot of these records, like these old 70s and 70s records, seem to have a ton of, and I feel like it's lost, is the art of the hi-hat open close thing. Mm-hmm. So cool and such a huge part of the groove. Yeah. You know what I mean? I've been listening to the same thing. I've been learning a bunch of these tunes for Atlanta Funk Society. And there's a ton of that stuff in there. Yeah. On the way over here, I was listening to. You wouldn't think Atlanta Funk Society would play a Grateful Dead song, but they are. Yeah. They're doing Scarlet Begonias. Cool. And so much of that little 16th-y open hi-hat shit, just like all over it, man. Oh, it's so good, man. Yeah. I love that stuff. Yeah. And you can't just do the coordination. Like, there's a touch to get that to feel right. Yeah. You know? Absolutely. Yeah. So what's when you're tackling a record with ATL Collective, you said you've done some transcribing for that, but are there records that you want to reinterpret and sort of rearrange? Well, that's the challenge, is like sometimes you'll do all this work and then the songwriter will say, I want to do it like this. You know, I'd like to do it in a style of, you know, like get out the mallets and a shaker and let's completely reinterpret the song. And that's fine. I mean, then you have like some of the records I didn't know half the songs on. You know, I knew the hits, and then the other half of the songs are great. Right. You know, so I mean, you're coming at it with an educated approach. Even, you know, you do the work and then you come in. Right. And those gigs are a lot of work because a lot of times we also do a set with the songwriter at the end of the night. Right. So you're learning a whole record. You gotta learn their stuff too. You're learning their stuff. Yeah. So. It's a great challenge. I always try to take those gigs whenever I can. Yeah. It's a lot of work, but I always feel like it's so worth it at the end. I'm just like, man, because it's also like a very communal vibe. Like, We did Thriller, Halloween, which is like another amazing record to learn.
Right.
Just, like, the grooves are very static, except for like one little thing will happen. One little thing will be added, or like a clap will come in on the chorus, or like something. You're just like, God, it's brilliant. I mean, it's a dance record,
right?
You know,
yeah.
But some of those grooves are just so bad.
Barry Gordy.
Yeah, man.
Every time I hear something cool on a Michael record, I'm like, man, fucking Barry Gordy.
Yeah, right. The guitar playing, all that stuff is just beautiful. But I mean, that whole group, like we walked away from it like just like it was almost like summer camp or something like that. You know what I mean? Like everybody involved was like, oh, remember Thriller?
You seem to have a pretty good balance between staying home and working, gigging around Atlanta, doing stuff in the studio, and going out on the road. So has that ever gotten out of balance? Do you have to be really conscious about how much road work you take? And
I kind of do. And I mean, it's funny because when I'm doing too much of one thing, I notice it in my attitude. Like I'm somebody that likes to kind of just do a ton of different things and genre hop and be on the road some, be home some. But you know, I have a lot of things here that are really good. And when I'm away for longer than 2 months, I'm like, man, I gotta get home. You know. But I think I have gotten to the point where I do consciously think about those kind of things. I was just out with a band called Delta Moon for 7.5 weeks in Europe. And it was a great tour. Attitudes were great the whole time, but it was time to get home. Yeah. You know, time to get back to my dog and my girl and my chickens. Like, go back. Edit that. Time to get back to my girl and my dog.
I'm not editing that. What about your chickens?
And my chickens. I got 3 out back. They're laying eggs right now.
Yeah. Call
me if you need some eggs. They're fresh, organic.
Right.
Yeah.
You can still have that in New York.
Yeah, that's true. On the rooftop?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do consciously think about it, and I do like going on the road. I mean, it is like, it's something to do in the year that's like, I guess it's like a kind of a guidepost of a career kind of thing, you know?
Right.
Like, I'm hitting the road now.
Yeah.
I have my next 2 months planned out.
Right.
I got a thing I do every day. I got one job to do. Like, in a way, it's very easy and hard at the same time, I would say, because, you know, it's not like you're sightseeing out there. You know, you're
right.
in a vehicle, you're driving every day. You know, we were working 6 nights a week in March.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was a lot of work, but at the same time, it's like you wake up and you know exactly what your day is going to be like, pretty much. And when it's not like that, it's a little bit of a zen thing where you roll with the punches and you can't complain. You know, you just go with what happens, because you're like at the mercy of the road.
Right.
But when you're home, you're like, you wake up and you're like, okay, I got all this stuff to do. I need to work on, I need to shed these tunes. I need to do this. I got to, you know, it's like, you don't exactly know what to do every day.
Right.
You know?
So
there's a little bit of a relief sometimes, I feel like, for being on the road.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Because your job is spelled out. I play the drums tonight. Right.
I get in the van, I get out.
Yeah.
I play drums.
In fact, there's always a bit of a transition when I come home and I'm like bad at the calendar, you know, and like stuff's going on where I'm like, oh God, I got a gig tonight. Okay. How do I get my gear in my car? You know, things like that. They're so stupid.
Yeah, I got to get back in the rhythm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, do you have to, like, when you go on the road for, you know, a month or 6 weeks or something, do you have to turn down a bunch of studio work here? Do you have to postpone clients? That's
probably the hardest part is, like, the week or 2 or even month leading up to tour, I'm ferociously trying to get projects finished, letting people know I'm going to be gone. Because the last thing I want to do is, you know, everybody's project is the most important thing to them at that moment, as it should be. Yeah. I mean, it's like music is such a, I guess, like a abstract concept that it's just like all you have is your own drive in your head, and you know, you just got to keep moving forward with it. And if it stalls, it's tough to keep momentum, you know. So like I try to like not do that to anybody, and so like the few weeks leading up to tour are pretty stressful. I'm trying to mix. I'm maybe putting drum tracks on people's stuff that I've promised, and you know, just have a list of things that I'm trying to get done, so I'm not leaving anybody hanging.
Man,
yeah, it was down to the wire.
It's a good problem to have, though.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is, and I'm not complaining. I'm busy, and it's beautiful.
And then what about coming back from tour? Like, does it take a while to sort of fill up the schedule again after you're back? Do people? Because I know in LA, like, if you disappear for any length of time, everybody forgets about you.
Right.
Just because it's so saturated and there's so many other people who they can turn to and whatever.
Right.
So do you find that you have to kind of like poke your head up and show your face when you get back into town?
A little bit, but just between us and your listeners, I don't.
Both of them.
Yeah. Hey, Mom. I don't really tell anybody when I'm going on the road. I just kind of, I mean, friends know, and I'm sure it gets around.
Right,
you know?
right.
But I do post some pictures and things like that slowly and leak some things out. But I'm just kind of like, when people call who aren't in my immediate circle and ask me if I'm, say, available on May 15th, I say, no, I'm not available on May 15th. And that's the end of the story. You know,
Right.
I feel like they don't need to know that I'm gone.
Right.
Or, you know, like, because people do, Leo's going to town.
Man, I hope you can't hear that.
Yeah. That dog will bite you.
Hey, buddy.
He's getting down on it, man. But that is the truth, man. If you go out for a long time, people get that in their head that you're a guy that goes on the road.
Right.
And I think they'd probably just rather not put the call in because they just assume you're going to be out on the road.
Yeah.
So I've been kind of careful to not pigeonhole myself as just somebody that's gone all the time.
Yeah.
You know, like I'll see people sometimes and they'll be like, "How's the road been?" I'll be like, "I haven't been on the road in a year." And they're like, "Oh, really?" It's like you just have that kind of vibe or idea of you, and then think you're always gone or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned social media. You seem you have a social media presence, but it seems pretty judicious and not, you know, a daily just onslaught of posts from Marlon.
Yeah.
How old are you?
36.
So I'm 35. And I was reading this article a couple weeks ago about how our generation is kind of the only one that straddled the digital age. Like we grew up in analog and we kind of came of age in digital. So my point is musicians that are younger than us are pretty much reliably all over social media.
Right.
And a lot of musicians that are older than us aren't at all.
Right.
So how have you incorporated that into your sort of musical existence and your business practice and your...
Probably not well enough, but I'm working on some stuff. You know, I'm kind of constantly feels like I'm working on my website and things like that. I do, you know, with Weisshound, we try to take advantage of it. Rick, being younger than me, is better at it.
Right.
But we have Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that kind of stuff, and everything's linked together. And we try to use Facebook to promote, but it's just really hard. There's so many bands out there, and it's kind of like that conundrum of setting yourself apart and being different and not being annoying. Right. You know. So, but I guess me personally, I post about gigs and stuff like that, and I feel like occasionally I'll get a few people out. But I really like to work on, like, I'm working now kind of on having more videos up of just myself playing, because the world needs more drum videos.
Absolutely.
Don't you think?
Oh, man. I'm just, like, searching YouTube for...
You can barely find any.
Where are all the drum videos?
I know, especially Instagram, there's none. But I do love, like, the good quality ones, like, you know, like we're talking about Aaron Sterling. And Paul Mayberry's videos, man, if you ever check that guy out.
Oh, you showed me him the other day.
Paul Mayberry is a bad man.
Yeah.
Jesus. I mean, like, the sounds and stuff he gets. I just love the guys that are working with different stuff, concert toms and huge bass drums and weird stuff. Like, they get far-out sounds.
I found that out about you quickly. Like, you are just obsessed with sound. You're not obsessed with drumming or coordination or licks or anything. It's all about, like, the ears. Like, what kind of sound am I getting out of this thing?
Dude, I will sit down sometimes to... I'm making quote hands practice, and I will tune for an hour.
Really?
Yeah, it's weird, man. I'll just like tune my drums and be like, what is this? You know, like just really experiment, and then I'll have to go. And I'm like, I didn't do anything. I literally did nothing.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, I guess it's good for something.
Well, there was an interview Michael Carvin did for Drummers Resource, and he talked about how, like, if you're really going to sit down and practice, like, you just have to set up a stool and a ride cymbal and just practice your ride cymbal.
Right.
Because as drummers, we'll just get distracted by everything else.
Exactly.
But, I mean, from what you're saying, it sounds like that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you sit down to practice something and end up getting distracted and screwing around with tuning, after an hour, you might have, like, 3 or 4 new tricks in your bag to bust out tuning-wise.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is just as important, like, you know, especially if you're on a session, like, getting the right sound for things or coming up with a unique sound, I think is just as important as...
Or like if an engineer says, I want the tom to go pew or to ring or something, and like have an old school like a 60s rack tom sound that rings or something, you know. Yeah. It's good to know how to do that quickly, you know, and not waste everybody's time.
Right.
You know. I'm not sure if I know how to make the tom go pew.
Oh, you could figure it out.
Yeah.
That's your next hour.
Yeah. I'll get the pad out with a 808 tom.
Put that on Instagram.
There you go. Just me playing a Roland V drum.
Hashtag pew.
You are good at social media.
Cool. Well, thanks a lot for talking, man.
Absolutely.
Really cool. Best of luck to you.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed that talk with Marlon. He's a guy who proves that it's possible to be deadly serious about what you do and be extremely good at it while still being laid back and funny and humble and not taking yourself too seriously. That's a guy you want on your project, no matter what your project is. Thanks to Marlon for talking with me, and thanks to my working drummer teammates Matthew Krause and Mike Jackson. Matt will be back next week with a very special interview with Nashville studio legend Eddie Bayers. We've been looking forward to this one for a long time, and we're really excited to bring it to you, so be sure and tune in for that. Leave us a rating and review on iTunes if you see fit. That's very helpful to us, and thanks for listening. Cheers.